Welcome to the Aiki Dojo Podcast. I am David Ito, Chief Instructor of the Aikido Center of Los Angeles. And with me is...
Bill D'Angelo, also from the Aikido Center of Los Angeles. Our topic today, which is Aikido in the 21st century.
Oh,
so we're talking about Aikido now, and in our time era, but also in the very beginning of the year. Like, what's on your mind and our mind about Aikido? What's changed? What's happening in Aikido in the 21st century? Because I know, like, you've been doing Aikido for 34 years. I've been doing it for 30. So we straddle the century change.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I started in 94, and that means you started in 90.
I did start in 1990.
So we were both a good chunk of time before the 21st century.
Before the internet.
That may be the more important distinction, is that we started before there was really any internet. I mean, there were what are those? They were listserv groups or for...
Yeah, listserv. There were Yahoo groups.
Right.
There were, yeah.
Totally different than today, where you have social media. But that, I guess, was kind of like the start of social media, right? In a way, not people don't think of it that way, but in some sense, it was social media. People were...
Yeah, AOL chat.
AOL chat. I know some people that still have AOL emails.
I did, and I still do. I just can't remember the password anymore.
Yeah.
It's still live. I wish I could remember the password because there's all these emails
Good content
with me and Free Sensei.
Oh wow!
But I don't know what the password is, and
I think AOL is owned. I think that the database is owned by a new company. We could probably find out and get you hooked back up.
Maybe we'll see. But
so what strikes you as the biggest change between the 20th and the 21st century? I mean, obviously the internet has had a huge effect, social media, but how have these technological and time changes affected Aikido from your perspective?
I think the biggest thing that's changed is the students' tolerance for suffering.
Oh wow! People were just they tolerate pain more.
Not pain. It's just that prior to the internet, the biggest thing that you staved off is boredom, right? And so when you wanted to learn about Aikido, you had to go buy a $12.95 book at the bookstore or check something out from the library,
or come to class.
But you had to spend your time reading this book. Today you have the internet, and if you have a question, you
type it into YouTube.
Yeah, you type it into YouTube, into Google, and then or ChatGPT, and then that thing answers your question.
So are people, as Aikido consumers, are they more sophisticated users of Aikido because of the availability of technology? From your perspective as a teacher, do people come to Aikido, does the technology and the data help people have a sense of what to expect, what to experience, or is it worse?
No, it's the tolerance of boredom, tolerance of uncomfortableness of boredom that the people, prior to, let's see, I think people really started to do internet stuff in like 98.
Yeah, so 2001 was the big crash.
No, I mean when Yahoo came out.
Right.
It was in the 90s.
Yeah.
And then you would get those discs for Yahoo and AOL, and what was the other one? There's a third one. Start with a P. Prodigy. And so, but prior to that time, right, you had to spend time in boredom. You go, hey, what? How do you spell O Sensei's name? How do you spell Morihei Ueshiba? How do you pronounce Morihei Ueshibu, as some people say? And then you had to go down, look it up in the dictionary or the encyclopedia, and and then if O Sensei wasn't a prolific enough person, he's not even in the encyclopedia. Right. So today, the smallest, most insignificant martial arts teacher
has a presence
on the internet. And then you could find that person who's like, yes, I'm Shodan and I teach Aikido. And then that person has a profile. Prior to that time, John Smith Shihan or Sensei, they weren't in the encyclopedia. They didn't even know who they were.
So because there's like a wide difference of the Aikido or any martial art that's on the internet, do you think people who start Aikido have a better or a worse understanding? I mean, do they have a less of an empty mind, less of an open mind? Do people come with, judgments about what they think it's going to be like, and then they're disappointed when it's not? I mean, all this content that's out there, people teaching class, seminars, old seminars which have been downloaded, do you think that's a net positive for the student, or was the old way, without us going like, oh, it's always better in the olden times, but do you see a difference?
Well, the thing is, it's all deception. It's all, I don't know, this thing where you think right? So think about this idea in, like, let's say 1995,
Okay.
and you wanted to learn Aikido, right? There was no resource other than books.
Right.
YouTube wasn't really a big
There's
thing.
some VHS.
Well, I mean, and VHS, but I mean, the point I'm making is that where did you get this knowledge from? Magazines.
Right. Magazines were huge.
Right. Magazines were a huge thing where if you want to know about Aikido people, you saw that on the cover of Black Belt magazine or something like that. Yukio Utada or someone like that was featured on the cover, and you bought it and went home and you poured through it. Or Black Belt magazine had a 25th anniversary issue of O Sensei, and then you all these articles and pictures of O Sensei, and then you cut them out and you put them on your wall and all stuff. Like,
I remember being a huge consumer of Black Belt magazine.
Yeah, all the time. And then all those different black martial arts type magazines.
Right. There were two Aikido ones, right? There was Aikido Today, which was American,
right?
And there was the Aikido Journal, which
Aikido
was
Journal.
sort of Asian.
But there were tons. But the whole point is that prior to the internet, in the encyclopedia, maybe O Sensei would have a little thing.
I remember, and I know Sensei's book was there, but I remember when the Bodhi Tree, the bookstore in West Hollywood that was on Melrose, I remember I would go every month to get my stack of Aikido Today and Aikido Journal and Black Belt. And of course, there was a whole martial arts section at the Bodhi Tree, which, I mean, I look now, like, at my bookshelf at home, I've got dozens and dozens of martial arts books. But you're right. It's like we don't use the older media as much.
It's not that the older media, but when you went to find resources about Aikido, like I said, in the encyclopedia, you were lucky if there was a little passage about Morihei Ueshiba, who started Aikido. But then there was nothing else. So you had to go and use magazines as your resource.
Right.
So, and then in those days, not anyone could just write for a magazine. You had to be someone.
Right. You had to be a martial artist.
Martial artist, well-known, somebody connected to get your article in Black Belt magazine or Inside Kung Fu magazine. But today, any Tom, Dick, or Harry can post something, write something, and go, oh, well, this is
so what you're saying is, like, with the older technology, the static technology, books, magazines, there was a gatekeeper in a sense that
credibility,
quality. Yeah,
right.
Credibility.
Yeah, and that, if you think about your doctor, right? If COVID taught us anything, it's that the guy who flunked out of science class is just as smart as a doctor. And you go, right. What do you know? You're not a very good doctor, because you read the study on COVID-19 and the skunk.
So do you think the internet is actually very democratic in that sense? Like, everyone has an opportunity. It's
not that it's democratic. It's that, like, if we just take the medicine, for instance, like, if you get this disease, the doctor says, this is the disease you have. And then you go home and you go, oh, that's what the doctor said. But now you go home and you research it and you come back to the doctor and you say, you said I have this thing, but I don't have 5 of these symptoms.
Right.
And then the doctor has to goes, well, you shouldn't be looking on WebMD for information. And
I can't tell you how many times my doctors before the pandemic would say, if you have a symptom, don't go on the internet, because you'll ratchet to the worst.
Well, you ratchet to the worst, but the reason why you ratchet to the worst is because you don't know how to read the information.
Right. You don't have judgments.
No. So, like, when my wife was pregnant for the first time, she had a miscarriage, and she had a miscarriage because of a thyroid condition that popped up.
Then you didn't know about.
We didn't know about.
Yeah.
And so we went to the endocrinologist that we were told to go to, and at the time I worked at this really wealthy country club, and I knew all these doctors, so I was talking to this really well-known endocrinologist. So we talked about it, and he told me all these different things. And so when we went to go see this other endocrinologist,
you had questions.
Well, no, he sat there and he was like, he just read off a whole bunch of different symptoms and said, you have this thing. And then I was like, yeah, but she doesn't have 5 of these symptoms. Oh, well, I mean, that doesn't make, and I go, Dr. Sharp told me that. And he goes, oh, you know Dr. Sharp? And like it changed the whole
dynamic
and the care that he was giving us. Yeah. Right. But so the thing is that if you can read WebMD and understand it, and then you don't just say like, hey, having this freckle means I have skin cancer.
Right.
But you look at, because you think it's all about big picture, right? WebMD gives you this one thing it could possibly be, but
there's 100 other things.
But as a physician, you have to look at the big picture, right? And so when I told this person, no, she doesn't have these symptoms, and then Dr. Sharp said it was this, he went, and he totally changed, and then changed everything, the treatment, the protocols, because I knew someone that was one of his teachers.
Well known.
Right? But that's the thing. So today, when you're reading about, like some people, Sensei's a fascist. Sensei is a fascist. They're focusing in on this one aspect of what Sensei was doing in, 1938 or something like that. And then they go, look, see, he's a fascist. But if you look at the big picture, they're all fascists.
Right.
You look at the big picture, they're at war. You look at the big picture, that's Japanese society.
Right.
They're not 100 years removed from feudalism at that point, right? And so
50 years maybe.
Like 1868 I think is when feudalism stopped.
Yeah, I was thinking like 1930 to 40 years.
Yeah, 40 years. Like it's still in that generation, right? So today when you read this book about Aikido, or you watch some fool's YouTube channel, and then you go, yeah, man, that's what Aikido is. That's not what it is. You're not really using your brain. You're taking the headline and then spouting it out as your own.
So I think you're making a really interesting point, which is like, I know that you and I share videos sometimes, not a lot, but every once in a while. And I think it's interesting that if you've been doing Aikido for long enough, you have a different perspective in terms of what you look at. Like for me, what I find really interesting to look at is things that expand my consciousness, expand my understanding of the technique, or I have questions for you and I'm like, hey, I looked at this, I did it this way, what do you think? And you'll be like, that's really good, or that's like absolutely terrible. But so I think the point you're making is that there's no gatekeeper for information today. No. And so people that are just starting out in Aikido, they don't have the background to say, that's okay, that's a mess, this person's totally crazy.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of crazy people on the internet.
But that's that thing, right? Like you're watching something on the internet which may or may not be well thought out, well researched, right, well experienced, and then you go, that's Aikido, right? And then so what we call old Aikido and new Aikido are very different. Like we watched this video right here. With Shirakawa-ryuji, who's very, very popular.
Right, very popular.
I sent this to a friend who's a Aikido teacher, very experienced, and he texted me back something really interesting. He just said, "No, it's just like world wrestling, professional wrestling." And he goes, "No setups, no attacks. It's all. I mean,
it's all technique.
No, it's all setups, no attack."
Right.
And I went, "You know what? You're right. It's all setups. It's all like the World Wrestling Federation." Oh. But then the thing is that Shirakawa-ryuji is trying to demonstrate flow.
Right.
Right. And and that's what the stuff he's doing. But if you mistaken that for Aikido, right, you're getting into a situation where now, how does someone do Aikido who's 50, 60, right, 70? They're not
taking. And he's very popular right now.
Yeah. And but a person who's above the age of 40, they can't break fall. So if they can't break fall, they can't do Aikido. But if you also look at Shiro Kawaruji's movements, he might have sword experience, but you don't see it in the technique. You don't see it in his ma'ai, you don't see it in his kamae or anything like that. But that's the thing, is that, as we talked about in the last podcast, is Aikido relevant?
Right.
And because it's not used for violence anymore, or self-defense for violence, then it becomes a form of play. And because it becomes a form of play, then you can do anything that you want.
Right. You lose the context.
Right. The context is lost. Like, when there's a lot of people striking today with, this thing, you think, dude, you can't strike like that. That's how someone in our dojo, way long time ago, broke her finger on someone's face because she went like that with the finger. The finger ran into the person's skull, broke her finger.
Yeah.
Right. But like, you can't. Okay, that's the thing, is that Aikido in the future, Aikido in the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 28th, 30th, it all has to have a certain base. And then the things around the base have to change, though.
I think that's really true, because if you do Aikido without an attack context, then the response is like, as you say, it's show. And I think that, one of the reasons why Aikido gets ripped on by people that don't understand it is they look at certain demonstrations or certain experiences, and that either the attacks are very weak or the understanding of movement and body placement is very weak. And so you have people just saying, well, it just clearly doesn't work. And I think that's also because of the lack of context. Like, people are not seeing it in context.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing, is that it became a form of play.
Yeah.
Right? And because it became a form of play on a certain level, play is not martial. There is no play in martial. So if there's no play in martial, how can it really be a martial art? And then it just becomes professional wrestling. Right? And then if it becomes professional wrestling, it's lost its base of Aikido. So when you think about but then that brings us to the question, what is the base?
Right.
The Kihon Waza. Is Aikido centered around throws? Kokyunage? No. See, the thing is that iriminage, the very fancy iriminage or kokyunage, timing throws, those are supposed to be expressions of expertise. When this person is taking Shiro Kawaruji's ukemi, they're showing their ability to take the ukemi.
Right.
Their ability to control their body, do all these different things. But most times, if you look at that video, the person taking the ukemi is just totally relaxing, and then that Shiro Kawaruji turns him in the way he wants him, and then throws him the way he throws him. There's times when he throws across his shoulder. All judo, there's no throwing across the shoulder. There's throwing over the shoulder, seo nage and stuff like that, but there's no throwing across the shoulder like this. That's because it's too close to your neck, and that's really, really dangerous. That's why it's called koshi nage, hip throw, not kata waza, shoulder throw, right? Or kubi nage, throwing over your neck, right? So that's the thing. It has to have a base. And what's that base? The base, when you start to go backwards, is centered around the sword movements. Right. How your hand guards your center. If you look at the way Shiro Kawaruji's moving, and I'm a huge fan. The way they move, man, it's amazing. I love it. But the thing is, he never guards his center. But also, we're also watching, Embu Aikido, demonstration Aikido. Right. He's demonstrating how he can flow and throw this guy around, and this guy's demonstrating how he can take the ukemi. Right. But that's the thing. To mistake that as the end-all, be-all of Aikido is a mistake.
Or the standard version of a technique.
It is not. What Shiro Kawaruji is doing is not standard. What Endo Sensei is doing is not standard. What Kanai Sensei is doing is not standard. Those are expressions of expertise, right? And then, how do you know that? Why are you sure? No, Endo Sensei is great. No, you have to think about, if you gave Aikido to this person who never did martial arts before, who's 50 years old, could they do any of those things? No. So then, if they can't, it's not Aikido. So if that is Aikido, then what Shiro Kawaruji is doing, or what Kanai Sensei is doing with his very fast-moving Koshinagi type movements, then those are all for young people. Right. So then Aikido is just for young people? No, Aikido is not just for young people. But then Aikido becomes like Aikido's supposed to be this vehicle towards self-development. So if I say, hey, 70-year-old guy, you got to learn breakfall because that's what this is all bent around. Look at Shirakawa Ryuji.
Right.
Like, it'll never work. And it's too dangerous to teach someone like that. But that's the thing. Whatever we do in the 21st, 22nd, 23rd has to always have a base, right? And then the things around it have to change.
Is there something, I mean, you're saying like context, base, purpose. Is there any positive aspect of the way media is consumed or displayed now that does help on the context?
It would be nice if social media and videos helped grow the popularity of Aikido.
It could.
It could, but it doesn't.
Yeah, not right now.
Well, not right now, or I don't know, maybe later. But like, what happens is that this BJJ person goes, "Man, Aikido's fake."
Right.
Or I saw this BJJ video where the person says, using concepts of Aiki in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And you just go, oh my God. But the whole point is that the people who make Aikido videos, myself included, aren't doing response videos. Yeah, well, BJJ doesn't work.
Right.
You know, and then I show all these reasons why BJJ doesn't work. Right? Because on a certain level, Aikido is supposed to be more sophisticated, more civilized. And a civilized person doesn't attack others. So then, because we're silent, it makes us look weak.
Right.
Right. And then if you look at some of these people's videos that do make videos, it's freaking horrible. A Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu person in 4 months could destroy a person who's been doing Aikido for 30 years.
Yeah.
Like one time I was at this seminar that I was teaching at, and I taught katatori, lapel grab, Nikyo with atemi. I drop down, cut back, drop it into Nikyo. So, I demonstrate the technique. I'm going around the room helping people. And I look over and I see these 2 6-dan Aikidoists.
Getting jammed. Who
are working in a throuple with this brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Right? And this kid was, maybe not brown belt, but he was a kid. Right. So I'm looking across the room and I watch him jam the hell out of those 2 guys. They can't even drop him. They can't move him. They can't Nikyo him. Nothing. And I go, F this. So I go over and I go, what's going on over here? All right. And at the time, I was 4th dan. And I go, oh. And then, I said, oh, you can resist him? And he's like, I can resist it. I go, all right, try to resist me. And then I dropped him.
Yeah.
And then I go, oh, okay. I said, now you know what I'm going to do, right? Yeah. Okay, so resist. Still dropped him. And then I go, okay, now you do whatever you would do in this situation as a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu player. And then he tried to do something. I still dropped him. And then okay, let's do it one more time. And then I did the atemi, and his face was kind of like, what the hell was that?
Right.
Because when I dropped him, he got the elbow. And then when, I atemied him. And then when I dropped him, I cut the arm, and then when he dropped into it, he got the elbow when I went to take the Nikyo. And at the end, his face his eyes were big. He was like, whoa. And then I go, okay, guys, keep going. Yeah. And then I look back a little while later, he was still jamming these 2 6th-degree black belt teachers in the most basic katatori, right? But the person, their katatori probably wasn't very good, but the whole point of it is that you get into the situation where people don't train hard because it's play. And then because they don't train hard because it's play,
it doesn't work. You've
been doing Aikido for 30 years and this, 3-month BJJ person jams you and you just go, oh, well, And then you ask them, hey, what time is BJJ class at? I better go down there. Forget that. Or, but like, that's the thing is that when you think about Aikido in the 21st century and we say that it has to have this base, but the things around the base have to evolve, we're not talking about evolving the technique. And then by evolving the technique, we're talking about, man, you better add BJJ in here. You better add a crescent kick here. No, that's not what they're talking about, right? We're talking about how to disseminate Aikido to the person of today.
Right.
Right? We're not saying change Aikido into BJJ. Those are 2 different things. right? So like, for instance, I was at this funeral just now for this well-known Japanese American person who passed away, and I was the representative of the Aikido Center of Los Angeles and Free Foundation to give incense. So I sat next to the person who runs the Japanese American newspaper, the Rafa Shimpo, in Los Angeles, Little Tokyo. So before the funeral, we're just talking, and then we were talking about, like, you know, for him, young people aren't reading the Japanese American newspaper anymore, only old people. And like we're at a funeral for someone who died who's no longer going to have a subscription. So we were talking about, like, you know, how to boost his readership.
Right.
And, you know, he's older than I am, maybe by 10 or 15 years. And he was just like, social media, I don't understand it. You know, I don't know how to do these things. We could do these things. But the way he was talking about social media was probably 10 years old.
The way it was 10 years ago.
No. The way he's talking about at this moment, that he's talking about the things of 10 years ago.
Right.
And so I was like, well, you got to have to do this, you got to do that. And, you know, and then, but it struck me that it's not that the paper has to change, just like Aikido doesn't have to change, but the method and how it's delivered or how you get subscribers is different. Right. So like this channel that we're on right now, at this time, has just over 9,000 subscribers, right? But that doesn't mean anything. But that's the thing, is that, like, how are people to find this information about Aikido, right? Originally, you wanted the topic of this podcast to be, why do people quit Aikido?
Right.
But the thing is that if we just talk about all the reasons why people quit, we're not making the problem better.
People. Right.
What we really should be talking about is, what do you love about Aikido?
Right.
Because that's the thing that people want to understand. And then that's what you want to be delivering with social media and the internet, right? So this 21st century, it's not that Aikido itself has to change. Perhaps the way it's taught has to change, but also the way in which the information is disseminated to the novice or
has to adapt.
Yeah, has to adapt. So if that person, they type in Aikido, and the first thing they watch is Aikido sucks, or the second thing they read is Joe Rogan says Aikido's fake.
Yeah, I mean, when I get a lot of exposure to, I mean, obviously I see a lot of it's fake videos, but I know, like, people that are my friends that know I've been doing Aikido for a really long time, and they might be, you know, extremely well educated. They respond to Aikido at a different level. They all say the same thing, which you and I have talked about, which is, wow, Aikido has this incredible philosophy. Aikido has this point of view, which is really different. Maybe that's just as a certain group of people that respond to that element of it. But I know, like, I run into people who are like, Aikido's fake. But I also run into a lot of people who are like, wow, like, it's got a really interesting viewpoint that maybe other martial arts don't have. And
they are exactly what's wrong with Aikido. Your friends and those people are exactly what's wrong with Aikido. Do you know why?
Why?
Because they read an article in Forbes about what Aikido is, and then they go, Aikido is this.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have any experience of Aikido.
Context.
They're just regurgitating what they read on the internet. Oh, Aikido is the art of peace. Peace is peace, and because peace is good, so we should have a lot of peace in our peace.
Right.
No, like they can't live that truth. They can't live that thing that they just read about, or they were just telling you, oh, Aikido is this.
Right.
So that's where we're getting into the situation where the knowledge of Aikido is what hurts Aikido, because you read this book or you read this article or you did this thing, you think you know what Aikido is. You got to train and train and train, and you go, oh yeah. Dude, Aikido is about peace, but on a certain level, it's not.
Right.
I don't have two separated shoulders, two hyperextended elbows, right? Because from the art of peace, right? And so you get into this week where people are getting into the situation, and not just in Aikido, in all traditional arts, and almost in anything that requires expertise, you go, Aikido is this.
Right.
Because you think you know it. But you don't know it. You got to know it with your body.
But doesn't that make Aikido kind of an interesting experience? Because you can theorize about it, you can fantasize about it, but until you so we had a new student today in the second class, and they were experienced as opposed, because they were like, we're here to watch. I'm like, well, you're here. Why don't you take the class? And they're like, really? And I was like, yeah. And you see like that after the class was over, one of the other senior students was talking to them, and they're like, yeah, it must seem really confusing to not understand the context when you start. But the flip side was, at least she was willing to try the experience, because it is, as you say, right? I mean, you can't understand Aikido without doing it.
But what you're talking about is that before, like, let's say, Pete Holmes has this funny joke, all right, about the internet and cell phones, and about Tom Petty.
But the time between not knowing and knowing is so brief that knowing feels exactly like not knowing. So life is meaningless. I've literally been in bed in the morning alone, just like, where's Tom Petty from? But I feel nothing, because there was no time to not know. Listen to me. There was a time, and I don't mean to get all Andy Rooney on ya, but there was a time that if you didn't know where Tom Petty was from, you just didn't know. And you felt that yearning and that deficit in your being. And you'd go around and ask actual people. Like, where's Tom Petty from? I don't know. And now I'm impregnated with wonder. And then they go and ask people. Until one fateful day, you see a girl wearing a Heartbreakers t-shirt, you rush up to her and you're like, hey, where's Tom Petty from? And she tells you, Florida. And a wave of endorphins and pleasure and meaning would wash over you. And you felt something. And that's how you met your wife. Do you understand? Your wedding song was Refugee.
But the thing is, the whole point of that is that there's this time where you become okay with boredom, right? So because you're okay with boredom, because you got to go home and look it up, or you got to go buy a magazine to find out, how to spell Weishiba, that you're okay with boredom. So when you start Aikido training and you don't understand the context, there's this boredom, this I don't know what's going on here, that you're not used to, because today the internet gives it to you like that.
Yeah.
And because it gives it to you like that, you're not comfortable or acclimatized to boredom. And so it's easy to quit. So in the old days, you were accustomed to boredom, right? And so when you started Aikido, you didn't understand the context, but you're used to not understanding.
Right. You're tolerant of it.
Yeah, you're tolerant of it. And so and then by the time you kind of, I guess I get what they're saying now. Like one of the biggest things people ask me in this dojo is they go, what's the name of that technique? How do you spell it? I go, well, it is in the curriculum which is on the board right there. And then they go over and they go, there's 7 techniques on this list. Which one is it? And then I have to go over and show them it's this one. And then they just goes, oh, okay. They didn't write it down. They didn't take a picture of it. They just went, oh, I know now.
Right.
But then that person's going to go, well, Sumiotoshi means corner and cornered. And then you start talking about Aikido. You go, you don't know anything about Aikido. It's funny because when I celebrated my 10th year in Aikido, I was like, Sensei, today's my 10-year anniversary. And he just looks at me and goes, that just means you don't know nothing.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh. But like he put me in my place,
Yeah.
But like that's the thing. The other day, someone said, "Oh, it's my 9th anniversary," or another person said, "Oh, today is my 1-year Aikido anniversary," and we have to go, "Yay!" Happy Aikido anniversary to you. Happy, you have to sing a little song, do a little dance to make them feel good about themselves. But really, it's just like what Furuya Sensei said to me. That just means you don't know nothing.
Yeah.
And then one of the funny things he said afterwards, he said, you know just enough to be completely dangerous.
Yeah.
And I thought, dangerous to kicking butt, but he meant dangerous to yourself. Right? So the 21st century what it brings in is this false sense of security, this illusion that Joe Rogan is talking about Aikido without ever having tried Aikido.
Right.
So it's like me going, well, Mexican food, you know what it tastes like, right? And then I'm telling you all about it, and you go, wow, have you had many Mexican dishes? And I go, actually, I've never even had it.
Yeah.
But if I were to say that, wouldn't you think I was an idiot? So then when Joe Rogan is talking about all these concepts, and I do watch Joe Rogan's podcast regularly, he's talking about all these things. If he has no experience in it and he's offering his opinion, doesn't that make him an idiot?
Maybe. At least it makes the opinion not informed.
Yeah, but see, today people don't understand the difference between the two, an informed opinion or an uninformed opinion, right? So what Aikidoists have to do to get themselves out of the hole that they're in is they would have to make all these videos showing, explaining, discussing these concepts that people are misunderstanding. And then you have to have super thick skin, because if you watch my videos and look at all the comments, they're hilarious. One person just wrote F you with all caps exclamation point. Another person wrote, this is a bunch of BS. This, and they didn't say like this guy. They didn't say this guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
Said, this is BS.
They said Aikido sucks. And then see, like, if you look at the thing is, but that's the thing, they're not even watching the video, because it would be different if they said, this guy said that Aikido is like this, this, and this, and then just tore it up from that point of view. But they don't. So like, for instance, someone commented on one of my blog posts, and Americans say Aikidoist, right?
Right, the Aikidoist.
British people, Australians, they don't say Aikidoist, I don't think. Most people use Aikidoka.
Right.
But Americans say Aikidoist. So someone commented on my blog post, not anything containing the blog post. He just wrote Aikidoist ? Aikidoka. And I thought, yeah, dude, whatever, man.
Right.
But he didn't say the comment that you said with this, or, when you said this, that you're completely uninformed. And then, we had a debate about it. He just went Aikidoist ? Aikidoka. But that's the stuff that's hurting Aikido.
But it seems like the thing that's like coming to my surface of my mind while you're talking about all of this is one antidote to that is really hard practice. Like you and I roughly started in the same time frame, and practice was vigorous and hard. Like I think back in those times, and like I would, like, the people who were my seniors, I'd be like, there's no doubt these people can kick butt. And I wonder whether, people that have that exposure and that training to it have a different mindset about Aikido that is not as exposed to people today, for a lot of good reasons, actually. We've talked about it on other podcasts. But I wonder, because I think there are a lot of people that understand Aikido, or at least they know more, and they're like, yeah, no, it's, if you have the right context, it works.
That's something I think about all the time. Is Furuya Sensei a better teacher than me because he built these really strong Aikidoists, right? Physically capable Aikidoists.
Right.
And then today I look at my own students and I'm like, where's my physically capable
students?
Yeah, where's my killers? Where are my warriors at? And I'm like, I don't know, man. It's kind of hard to say. So the thing about hard practices, we're getting to the situation where now we have to go back to the de-evolved aspects of Aikido, right, in order to make people do Aikido, because they all think it's irrelevant and not effective. So now we got to start gouging each other's eyes out, fish hooking each other, choking the life out of the, it's like you have to do all these things. We just think those things only lead you astray.
Right. Well, the thing that I think when you were talking about Aikido in the 21st century, and we talked about it before the podcast a little bit, is that Aikido today, at least I can't speak about other Aikido schools, but this school that you lead, that you teach, like, we have a really good cross-section of people, cross-section of genders, cross-section of culture, cross-section of really courageous people. Like the people that I find really courageous in our dojo that are not the teachers are students that started late in life. Like, I try to imagine, like, I'm 56. I try to imagine, what if this was my first freaking week in Aikido? Really? Like, to have that kind of mindset is a warrior's mindset in a way that really impresses me, because I try to imagine starting today. Like, that's crazy, because that means to get the 30 years of training that I have now, I'd have to be 85.
Right. And then when you were just advocating for hard training, where does that 56-year-old person fit?
I mean, I think it has to be modified. But I mean,
No,
for
but
me,
in the old days, we didn't modify anything for anyone.
No,
right?
I know, I understand. But what I'm saying, like for me, the people that that start today are at a whole nother psychological level than when you start in your 20s. Because in your 20s, like I also I'm like a rock climber. I think I was just reading an article about rock climbers in their 20s versus mentors that are like my age, and how the game changes and what you do, the amount of risk that you're willing to tolerate, the knowledge that you have that this is risky versus when you were young, you didn't know it was risky. And I think it's very similar for Aikido. Like
It is, but it is not.
yeah,
So if I go free climbing and I'm 20, right, it's different when if I go free climbing and I'm 56.
yeah,
If you're 56 and you go free climbing, you must know really what you're capable of.
right,
Because when you push off to jump to that next rock and you don't have that lift, you're dead.
right,
So Aikido doesn't have that.
right,
Because Aikido doesn't have that true element of danger, then you have people walking around going, that's what, that's
Right.
what we're supposed to be. And then, like you watch Aikido and you go, my God, man, you're 75 years old. You can't do Aikido like that.
right,
Right.
right.
So like
It's not possible.
a lot of people are trying to copy Miyamoto Shihan. For one, he doesn't have to take ukemi in the class.
right,
So he can do Aikido any way he wants. But also, you as a 56-year-old person can't really emulate that Aikido.
right.
Because,
Your body doesn't cooperate.
yeah, your body doesn't cooperate. And then sooner or later, you're going to get injured by doing that thing. And then you're going to be out and you think, what is this worth? And so that's the thing. We bring it back to this 56-year-old person who starts Aikido. I don't know what the right way is. I don't know if we should teach people hard, soft, more key exercises, less key exercises, more breathing exercises, and all
Right.
these different things. I don't know. The only thing I do know is that we should give people a workout. But if I were to tell my teacher, Reverend Kensho Furuya, hey, we should just give people a
You
workout.
get slapped.
After I woke up from him punching me in the face, I'd be like, yeah, this is not the gym.
Right,
But on a certain level, Aikido is these people's gym.
right. That's what they do to stay in shape.
Right.
So that's kind of what you're saying is like for the threshold Aikido experience, at a minimum, if everyone's getting a workout, then that's a baseline. Yeah. That's the baseline that you came to understanding as a teacher. Like you thought like this is what makes sense.
It's what makes sense, but it's also what people are looking for, right? Like nobody's looking to like, hey, I want to do 3 months of Aikido, and then I'm gonna go into the ring. You go, the person who does Aikido isn't that type of person,
Right.
right? But you also don't mind doing something which is exercise, fitness, but also has a martial tinge to it.
Right.
You don't mind that either. So what I'm trying to give people today is that same thing. It is a workout, but it's also twinged with
Martial context.
martial context,
Right.
because that's what you're doing, and then that's how you're developing yourself. So simultaneously as you're developing your body, you're also developing your
Mindset.
mind and your spirit.
Yeah.
For the 56-year-old, how do they fit in? Well, that's the teacher's job.
Right.
So if everybody in there's huffing and puffing and doing all these things, it's my job to take care of that person.
Ratchet it down at that for a part
Well,
of the class.
Well, or ratchet that person's aspect of it down, and then build that person up, and then make sure that no one's beating the crap out of them. See, in the old days, they just beat you up.
And you adapted.
Well, because so many people were joining Aikido that you're like, yeah. And then the truest person to do Aikido on is a beginner, because they don't know how to
They
take.
don't know how to move.
They don't know how to take ukemi for you. And so they do all these things, and then you learn how to like throttle somebody.
Right.
So when I was a student, they beat up a lot of first month students, right? But then
I don't mean to laugh, but I understand.
but the dojo was getting 10 people a week to join,
Right. There were a lot of people.
right? And so this guy, he joins, he's kind of big. You go, I'm gonna see if I can do it to him, and then you do it, and you go, oh, that's how it works,
Right.
Yeah, okay, and then you would say stupid stuff like, man, I can't wait till you get better because I'm going to try to break your arm. Right? And then that person quit and you're like, I want him to quit anyways, because you
Right.
only wanted strong people in the dojo.
So, I mean, you say like we only want strong people in the dojo, but I mean, I think one of the things you and I have both noticed is that we have a really strong female student body at the dojo right now. And a lot of the people that join are women. The newcomers, there's a huge contingent are women.
Well, that is something which is demonstrates the change of Aikido. When we were students, we
were only a
regularly
few.
had maybe only
Two or three.
2 to 4 women.
Yeah.
All the rest were men. So like 95% were men, 5% were women.
Yeah.
Today, on a
Almost 50-50.
close to 50-50.
Yeah.
And there are days when the class is 50-50, half women, half men.
Right.
But the interesting thing is, I don't know if you noticed that, and I'm not sure about all dojos. In this dojo, the women train harder than the men.
Yeah.
Right? So you wonder about that shift. So if I'm like, when I was a student, one time I struck someone yokomanuchi, and I stepped in at the same time, and then we like
clashed
feet, and the person stubbed their toe. He punched me in the stomach. Today, I would not allow that.
Right.
I would go punch that person in the stomach. But today we don't allow that. And so any person who was maybe smaller in stature, weaker physically, in those days couldn't get into Aikido.
Right.
Because we would just smash you on the first week.
And you'd leave.
But today, those people are getting over that hump, and they're able to stay.
Right.
And then they show more grit and tenacity than some of
Than
these
the men.
guys that are all big and buff. Like we had this karate person join. He was buffed out, totally lifts weights. He was a black belt in karate and wanted to get some smoothness in Aikido into his karate. Dude, that guy lasted like a month or two. And then he sent me a message. He said, I wrenched my neck rolling. I don't think I can do this. And I was like, in my mind, I'm all, man, you're a black belt in karate.
Man up.
Man up. And I was just like,
yeah.
But that's the thing. Like being big and strong doesn't mean anything in Aikido. It's all technique.
Right.
And so this person, and he only came to fundamentals class, which is no forward rolling.
Right.
Right. And I wrenched my neck doing backward rolls. What? Yeah, but he was totally buffed out.
Yeah.
And he was a current karate student. And he said, I wrenched my neck. I can't sleep at night. I'm going to have to quit. And like I laughed my behind off because I was just kind of like, but you're
you're a martial artist.
You're a 25, 30-year-old martial artist, karate student. That's what?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. But that's the thing is like when we're thinking about Aikido in the 21st century, we have to try to bring it to the masses.
Right.
Because what's getting ahead of us? Aikido negativity videos. Aikido's fake. Aikido's not effective. Aikido's this. Aikido's that. The people who make these videos, myself included, have to try to get ahead of that.
Right.
And show the beauty of Aikido, show the power of Aikido, and then be the lone voice going, Aikido is effective. Aikido is real. Aikido is a martial art. And not the people that go, well, if you want, you can come down to my dojo, bring your gloves. We'll show you what Aikido, like, no, not that person either, though. But just the voice.
Right. In the wilderness.
But the thing about it is most Aikidoists only make personal Aikido videos, right? For their own consumption and their close friends. Most aren't making Aikido videos for the world.
Right.
Right. And so like this podcast is supposed to be something like that. I mean, not that some other martial artists will watch one whole hour of me blathering on about Aikido, but you would hope that they would.
Right.
Because the thing is, if you're a fool if you think it's style versus style. It's not. It's always practitioner versus practitioner.
Person versus person.
Yeah. Practitioner versus practitioner. Right. And so that person who, does judo, he may not be very good, but this other person is. So which one is the representation of judo?
Right.
But people are foolish if they think just watching one person and then making their judgment because Joe Rogan said so, thinks that Aikido is fake.
I mean,
and
I was
ineffective.
thinking one thing that really, when we were talking about context, is like I love watching other sports, other martial arts, but any physical activity. I love like trying to learn. And one of the things I've been watching lately, because my girlfriend and partner was a dancer, is watching like ballet classes, not ballet performances. And like you see in the ballet classes, like they have all these different positions. You have to master these individual movements, which then are put together later and turned into a dance, which is even then is still a performance, right? But I think martial arts, and especially Aikido, is a lot like that. Like, if you were to come to Aikido class and only watch the class, you're like, some of that stuff, you're like, I don't really understand the context for it. But then later you see like a full demonstration of it. You can see how the elements work together. And that I think that like, especially like something like ballet, which has a very strict heritage in terms of, it's almost like a traditional martial art. Like if you study ballet in Russia or ballet in America from a traditional teacher, you're going to do exactly the same thing.
But you know what's happening now?
What?
They're going down to the Brooklyn Dance Center where they're doing their rendition of Black Swan with 14-year-olds with no real ballet training, and they go, ballet sucks.
Yeah, but it doesn't.
No, but because they're looking at it from that context and standpoint, which is basically the same thing they're doing today. You're watching a video made by a person who's been doing Aikido for less than 10 years, and they're saying this is what Aikido is, or they're doing these techniques, and then the person watching it goes, Aikido sucks.
Yeah.
Right? They're not trying it out. They're not trying out ballet, right? They're not going to watching these girls live and die, you know, at the Bolshoi.
The Bolshoi ballet, right? The Bolshoi ballet.
Yeah, they're
super traditional.
And you watch that person move and you go, whoa.
Yeah.
You're watching third graders do, you know,
Dancing.
Black Swan, and you go, ballet sucks.
Right.
Kill yourself. Because every person has a voice today, right? But like, I thought that I would hate comments, that they would just destroy
be
me.
A downer.
Oh my God. It makes me laugh so hard. Sometimes when I'm feeling down, I read some of the comments. And they're like, "F you, Aikido." I just start laughing, and I just go, "My God,
there's an element of, I call it like the Reddit culture, where people like they just torch each other. Like there's like a torching culture that is in social media today, whether it's on Facebook or Reddit or YouTube. Like people almost like they enjoy the conflict and the like. It's almost like there's a more negative space in social media than a positive space. Like people aren't building each other up. They're like, "Oh my God, you bought that car. You are so freaking stupid." Like,
yeah, but what's the reason for that?
Well, I don't know.
You wonder, what are Americans more happy than they were 30 years ago? Yeah. Are they less happy? I would posit that they are less happier than they were 30 years ago. And because you're less happier, you're more negative.
Right.
Right. And then you just lash out at someone. Haven't you ever had a coworker where you and that person kind of got into it, and then the next day they came to you and hey, I was having a really bad day.
Yeah. Totally. Absolutely.
Dude, that is the internet. I'm having a bad day, so I'm going to make other people have a bad day. There's this video that I'll put up right now that
one of the best ways to drain people's energy nowadays is via the internet. This woman is an astrophysicist. Actually, this is not how space works. Read a book. Now I just wait for the comments to come in. Hey, can you mansplain any louder? Yeah, sure. These are all different accounts that I have set up. The energy you get this way isn't quite as pure, but if you do enough of it, it'll fill you up. Shanghai sucked. Where was the Chinatown? Jason Mraz is just too weird for me. Jesus actually hates horses. Childhood obesity, LMFO. When they call you a dumbass, you know you've got them. They called me a dumbass. Women are getting too tall. Yeah. You can drain their energy via social media without having to even be near them. That is racist. You're correct. It is. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, they hate me.
It's surprisingly simple to get total strangers completely furious with you.
They should get a life.
And then, but it was so funny, the things that he would say just rile people up to get that energy, right? Bad attention is the same as is better than no attention. So I start something just to get someone to dialogue with me.
Yeah.
Right. But if you went to that person's house and said, "Hey, why did you say that?" You go, "I'm sorry, Bill, I was having a bad day."
Yeah.
Right. And that you're looking for anything to gain that attention, to start a dialogue with people. There early on when I was writing my blog, I wrote something and this person went off on me in the comments about like friendships or something like that. And I said, I am really sorry that you feel that way. And then I kind of spoke about the post, and then the person came back and went, I'm really sorry about that. Yeah, you're right. And then every blog post I put up, that person likes it and shares it.
It's interesting. I think that I think you're right. I think the other thing too that that you and I don't necessarily always think about as much is that the way Twitter or Facebook or any social media is constructed, it's there's more energy that gets out of it if you're agitated. Like if you're like, I have to respond to this, or I have to like it or dislike it or whatever it is, but you're agitated, that creates this psychological condition where the network is always trying to agitate you to get you to click. And I think there's a disproportionate amount of that that's negative. Like if you're like, oh, this makes me really happy, you might mellow out, chill, calm down. But if you're agitated, then you're constantly like, I'm going to flame this person, or I'm going to post your thing and have other people flame you. And I don't really use Facebook. But I mean, I've seen some pretty gnarly Facebook takedowns in my time. And I think that the platforms they're more catered to the negative side of our personality than the positive, which I think you're kind of... Yeah,
but I mean, every time they try to pass those laws about internet anonymity, where, like every person it has to be the true you.
Right.
It gets struck down, right? And people rally against it. Why? Because you want that anonymity to say, you suck with impunity. That no one could ever come after you and say, well, I'm sorry, what did you say?
Right.
And then you go, I didn't think it was a thing, right? Because we're all tough, keyboard tough guys.
Right.
Right. If you had to really back up what you said,
you'd be a lot more careful what you say.
What did they say? What did they say about guns? An armed society is a polite society, or something like that. So, but that's the hard part, right? Like you're trying to, we kind of digress a little bit. We were talking about like social media a lot, but really it's like trying to understand Aikido in the 21st century. It's not Aikido itself. It is perhaps how Aikido is taught, but also how Aikido is viewed.
Right.
The perspective of Aikido.
Yeah.
That, prior to the pandemic, I never talked about Aikido on the internet. I never went, I don't know, and no one ever talked to me about it. But now that I write a lot on the internet and I make videos and all these different things, it creates these dialogues.
But I do remember Furia Sensei telling us, like, don't go on the freaking internet.
Well, there's all these reasons why you're not supposed to, because there's this idea that if you, I think the number's 500, if you watch this video 500 times, your mind can't distinguish between whether it's you or not.
Really?
Yeah. But the whole, I don't know if it's 500, but there's this idea that, the person said, if you've listened to this Taylor Swift song 500 times, your mind thinks that you're friends with Taylor Swift.
Really?
Yeah.
This is why content is king. I call this a 7-11 principle. It takes 11 touch points for somebody to buy your shit. So this is data from Google's 0 Moments of Truth, where they researched a whole bunch of people's search history. Yeah, that's scary. It takes about 7 hours for you to be able to become an acquaintance with somebody from a stranger. This is Professor Dunbar. 30 hours to be casual friends, 50 hours to be friends, 300 hours to be best friends. Mate, what's your name? Henry. So Henry, who's your favourite artist on Spotify? If I was like, put a vibe on, what would you choose? Drake, awesome. Do you reckon you listen to Drake for 300 hours in your life?
Yeah.
Yeah? Drake's your best friend. Listen to this. Your brain cannot tell the difference between spending 300 hours with Drake in person or through his content.
Right, but the context is
wow. I got to look that up. And
the
check
rationale
that
is the same for this Aikido.
Martial arts.
When I watch this video, if I'm watching this Aikido video and it's a bad Aikido video, and I'm watching it and I get into a subconscious state, my mind cannot distinguish between it being me or not me, and then my body starts to move that way, and that's where we pick up these little nuances, and that's one of the reasons why Furia Sensei did not want us to watch videos. Right. But the whole thing is that we can make videos about why Aikido sucks, why Aikido quit, why people quit Aikido, why Aikido has to change. But we're only adding into the negativity of this
Of
whole
the
thing.
process, yeah.
We should really make videos about what do you like about Aikido? How did Aikido benefit you? How did Aikido change your life?
Right.
Because those stories and those testimonials, that's what will get people to join Aikido. But if I make all these videos about how bad Aikido is, or how Aikido is broken, needs to be fixed, and what's crap bad about Aikido, we're basically telling people Aikido's no good.
Right.
So we should be making Aikido videos about why do you love Aikido? What's great about Aikido? What did you benefit from Aikido?
Yeah, how does it transform your life?
All these things. And you go, that's what I want. Oh, Aikido, I have really bad ADHD, and Aikido helped me to harness my mind and be more productive. I want that. I had really bad self-esteem, and I did Aikido, and it really helped my self-esteem. I want that.
Right.
And then people would join. Because if I told you BJJ or Aikido or swimming or yoga or Krav Maga gave you good self-esteem,
You do those
you
things.
would do it.
Yeah.
Right? But if I go, well, Aikido's broken, I make videos for their clickbait, and how to fix Aikido because it's broken. The 10 things that suck about Aikido, the disadvantages of Aikido training. You're not going to join.
Downer, no one's going to watch
Right,
that.
because nothing's perfect. BJJ's perfect? No,
Right.
Nothing is perfect. Name the last BJJ superstar that's won a MMA UFC title.
Long time.
Been a while, right? So if it was if it was the best, it would be the best all the time. It's the practitioner,
Yeah.
right? But it really comes down to is we all have to change in this 21st century. Me as a teacher, I have to think, how do people learn? What are the contexts? I have to become a better teacher.
Right.
I have to work on my lessons plans. I got to do all these different things to become better at the craft of teaching.
Right.
Or I could just make a video why Aikido sucks or why Aikido's broken, right? No. And so I have to think about okay, then how do people today learn? What are people today looking for? And then after, we had a black belt meeting yesterday. Remember the whole thing, that dynamic that the outline I created for you guys all
Right.
to try to understand how to develop your own your classes.
Right.
Those same things. It has to be doable, right?
Achievable.
It has to be rooted in the basics.
Enjoyable.
It has to have some level of enjoyment. You have to be mindful of what you're doing and how you teach. All these things. Or I could just say, this is how I learned in 1979. We're doing it that way.
Right.
Well, that's true. That is one way to do it, right? But
It's not adapting to the current
no,
situation.
you have to adapt it. Everything has to adapt. Just like I was talking to that guy from the Japanese American newspaper, Ralph Shimpo. It's like you have to adapt. So you have to ask yourself, how do people consume this media? How do people do this stuff? And then you have to try to do it the best you can. But that's the definition of duality, right? Duality is trying to understand how to live in this reality as you move towards spirituality in this duality. But as Joseph Campbell said, doing it in the most ethical way.
Right.
Right. And then trying to do that. I can make clickbait videos. I could do all these things. One student said, the more controversial the videos, the better they'll be. And then you also have to have, half naked girls in there. You go, but that's not Aikido.
Right.
So, that's the hard part, is to create this idea of we have to adapt. Everyone has to adapt. In Buddhism, they say the only constant is change.
Right.
Right. But you try to keep Aikido the closest to the core as possible.
But I do have a question for you.
Sure.
So we're talking about Aikido in the 21st century. I think this topic came up in yesterday's instructors meeting. When we were doing Aikido when we were young, as you said, there was no internet, or the internet was very limited. It was not image-based. It was basically like listserv. You ask a question and you get an answer. Today, in Iaido and Aikido, we have people that attend classes online, which is interesting because I think of my job as a lawyer. If you wanted to, you could work entirely from home. People don't do it anymore, but a lot of people do. And so they're online. They're having an online experience, either online with other lawyers, online with other clients. But if we tried to imagine Aikido in the 21st century, like last century, if you told me someone was just going to watch it and take a class that way, I'd be like, I doubt it. But that's happening, right? I mean, that is an element of the people that are part of the dojo, and it has like it's different. Like I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just like to me, I just find it amazing that people will primarily attend virtually for something.
Well, so I guess your question would be, can you learn Aikido on the internet?
Yeah, maybe that's the question.
Yes and no.
Right.
Because remember, it all comes down to the practitioner.
Right.
That practitioner, if they're good enough,
can pick it up
and learn it to a certain level. And you think that's bull, right? It's not. In the late 90s.
I know the story you're going to tell. Yeah.
So in the mid 90s, Ruth Sensei made this 9-video series called The Art of Aikido.
Right.
In the late 90s, we got this videotape in the mail from this kid in the Midwest who was asking for instruction, and he wanted to someday move to LA and become Ruth Sensei's student. So, we never, it was horrible as we never responded. We never responded because you could never just sit down and watch the video all together.
Right.
So each of us watched this video on our own, but we never came together to talk about it. But when you watch this video, he was doing it.
Right.
And it was funny because I think I've talked about this in another podcast where he's doing the techniques just like Ruth Sensei, and he goes and saying the things that Ruth Sensei says, and he goes, and then you move forward, cough. And it's funny because we were watching it, we're like, cough? And then Sensei said, no, in the video, I coughed.
Yeah.
And that's how closely the person followed it. Right? And he went, wow. And
they were really paying attention is kind of what you're saying.
Yeah. And then a couple years after that, in the early 2000s, before Ruth Sensei died, these dudes showed up from the Bahamas.
I remember. I was there. I remember that.
And they had studied Aikido with Ruth Sensei's videotapes alone.
Right, for like a year.
For a while, whatever. And then they showed up, and their Aikido wasn't half bad.
No, it wasn't.
They had no real endurance, but their Aikido wasn't half bad.
They were doing Aikido.
Yeah. From Ruth, and they did not have a teacher.
Right. All they had was the video.
Right. And you go, whoa, man.
So maybe the answer is it's possible.
It is possible. It's just highly improbable.
Right.
But the thing is that human beings just don't work that way. Right. Zoom is, you could do all your work on Zoom, but you never really develop a relationship with
the people,
with the person.
Yeah.
And then you also can't see nuances. The person rolls their eyes or something like that.
Right.
Because you didn't catch it on Zoom. And so those are the things that human beings by nature are social animals. You have to be in the same room. You want to be grabbing somebody. You want to be talking to them face to face. You want to eat with them, drink with them face to face. You doing it on Zoom is not the same thing.
Right.
It's weird. It's like this weird lack of warmth. Like you do it, and then afterwards you turn the thing off. You feel lonely afterwards.
Yeah.
As opposed to when you leave your friends, you feel
jazzed.
Yeah. And that's because you're not in the same room with them.
Yeah, well, I think the comment that you made is really true. We are social animals, and Aikido is a very social practice because it's unique among martial arts in terms of the way you protect the uke. The uke has to take the technique. And like you said, like people like to work with beginners because people don't know how to move yet, so their body's just crumpling or doing whatever it does. But yeah, I mean, Aikido is very, very social.
But that's the thing, as we kind of finish up here, Aikido in the 21st century still has to have this base, this core of Aikido.
Right.
But around it, how it's taught, the perspectives, those different things, they'll all have to adapt to the times, right?
Yeah.
Joseph Campbell talks about like the myths of the time or the religions of the time were successful because they came in during that time.
Right.
But the myths and religions of today have to be tweaked to the people of today. And so when you think about this idea of Aikido, yes, we can all do it like Sensei's day, but some of those things we can't do that. We have jobs. I have a mortgage. Those people didn't have jobs, didn't have mortgages. They were hungry.
Right.
Right. So you go there and you think about like, I'm going to do it exactly like Sensei did it. Okay, you're white. You're out. I'm going to do it exactly how Sensei did it. You're poor. You're out.
Right.
Like, see, like, Sensei has the luxury of not teaching foreigners, right? He has the luxury of not teaching people who are poor,
Right.
right? He has all these luxuries that we just don't have today, right? So what would Sensei say to LGBTQ people? What would Sensei say to a non-binary person? What would Sensei say to a person with one leg?
Right.
What would Sensei do? We don't know. So then if we don't know because there are no precedents, then we have to
Make
examine,
our own rules.
Make our own rules. You go, well, a guy with one leg, we'll do what we can. So, and then you'll have to come up with a way to teach that person.
Which is creative.
Yeah. So, but the thing is that if we just go away, Aikido must not change. A majority of what we're doing today may not even be Sensei's Aikido.
Right.
Right? Because Sensei is so far ahead, right? He's running a 100-mile marathon. We're still running a 26.2.
Right.
Like he's way ahead of us. But it's our job to train to try to get to that level someday. And we can't get to that level if we change the core of Aikido. But we do have to change the outside of Aikido.
Like the wrapper.
The wrapper and what the things around Aikido have to evolve.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good place to start. I mean, to stop. I'm sorry. To stop.
Well, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast. Thank you.
Thank you very much.